Hello, friends. This tutorial will teach you some general glam makeup tips and how to execute this eye look, which is supposed to imitate like an oil slick. This look was suggested to me based on the picture on the left, which is from a Pinterest post. I couldn't find the original artist since the Pinterest link went to a spam page, and reverse Google image search didn't really turn up anything. So if anyone knows who the original artist is, I will happily credit them, but I don't know who they are. There's lots of other similar tutorials on YouTube and stuff. I watched one from Kitten Mustache to see how she did it. So you can look at hers too, or anybody else's. They're kind of all pretty similar. I decided to use lighter colors than what are in the pin because I thought it would be a little easier for novices, and I want this to be something that everyone could maybe do. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. Maybe wait until the end of each slide, though, because I might answer your question later in that slide. So before you even begin applying makeup, you need to think about your skincare. Even if you're the best makeup artist in the world using the best products, you're going to have a rough time if you don't take care of your skin. The first thing to be aware of is your skin type. Everyone's skin is different, but generally most people fall somewhere into 4 categories: dry, oily, combo, or normal. If you lean oily, you want to look for products with salicylic acid or glycolic acid, which will help control some of your sebum production. But while you're trying to remove excess oil, it's important to remember that you have to balance it back out, because if you overstrip your skin, your oil glands will kick into high gear and overproduce sebum. And that creates a not so fun feedback loop. If you lean dry, look for products that contain hyaluronic acid and glycolic acid. You want to steer clear of anything with super heavy moisturizers because this could clog your pores and cause breakouts. Regardless of your skin type, make sure you're drinking plenty of water and using SPF when you're outside. Another thing to keep in mind is that your skincare needs can vary throughout time. Despite the fact that my skin is a little on the drier side, I know I tend to get a little more acne prone around my period. If you're having trouble understanding your skin's patterns, you can try keeping a journal and make sure to note what the weather's like that day, where you are in your cycle if you have one, and maybe document your water intake and diet that day as well. If no pattern emerges after you do this for like a few months and you're really pressed about it, it's probably time to go see a dermatologist if you can. But just remember that no one's skin is perfect all the time, and balanced skin is a journey. Before you start your makeup, you also need to make sure your hair is completely off your face and your hands are thoroughly washed. After you assess your skin's general needs, it's time to prime your face. There are a lot of reasons you should prime. 1, it will smooth out your skin in order to ensure an ideal plane for makeup application. 2, it will help your makeup last longer by giving it something to grip to. Your priming goals will change depending on your skin type as well. If you have oily skin, you'll want a pore filling primer. Generally, these formulas will use dimethicone. When you're applying this type, make sure you're really pressing it into your pores. This will give a smaller appearance to your pores, as well as prevent oil from making your makeup slip and slide around throughout the day. Dry skin will want to use a more moisturizing formula to help smooth out any dry patches so your makeup won't cling to any flakes or texture. Again, this will also give your makeup something to bond to other than your skin, which can change throughout the day. My skin is kind of dry combo with an oily T-zone. Despite the fact that much of my face is like the Sahara Desert, my nose is especially oily, and makeup will slide off of it if I'm not careful. I use a blurring pore-filling primer from Cover FX in this area and the center of my forehead and chin. I use a moisturizing primer for the rest of my face from Maybelline. Just a general note, you don't need to spend a lot of money to get a good product. Before I went back to school, I subscribed to a few subscription services that sent me some higher-end products, which is where I got most of my products that aren't drugstore. I've noted it in the bottom product description where I got my products. Regardless, for the most part, you can get really excellent products on the cheap. So this step isn't entirely necessary if you don't have a lot of discoloration. I personally find doing this step makes my complexion products even my skin out better. In general, you want to do this under the rest of your makeup. My main discoloration is under my eyes. Dark circles are sleep-related, and I suck at sleeping. They're also genetic, so you might have these no matter how much sleep you get. Furthermore, just about everyone has a dip where their orbital rim protrudes, and you can't get rid of this without getting fillers, and depending on how defined yours is, it can make bags look worse. Anyway, to reduce the appearance of these dark circles, I apply an orange color corrector to my under eye. I also have some redness around my nostrils from visible capillaries and on my chin from acne scarring. For redness, you want to use a green color corrector. The trick to color correcting is that you don't want to see the color corrector super vibrantly. If you can see the color, you've probably done too much. You also want to make sure you're only applying the color corrector where correction is needed. Unlike most makeup, you don't want to blend it out and around too much. I use my fingers for this, but you can use whatever you like. If you have breakout prone skin, I recommend using a brush and limiting using your fingers in all makeup application. This goes for primer too. If you're using your fingers, it's essential you make sure your hands are clean so you're not spreading bacteria everywhere, which can cause acne. Also, the oil from your fingers can upset your skin. I use a color correcting palette from NYX, and I pretty much only use the green and orange colors, but depending on your discolorations, you can make use of a lot more colors. Based on the color wheel, you want to correct discoloration with the opposite or complementary color. This will neutralize discoloration and create a more even color. This step makes you look kind of crazy at first, but you just have to trust the process. I found that doing a cream contour under my foundation makes my contour look more natural. The important thing to remember is that adding shadow will shrink or push back the area, and adding light will bring it forward. I'm using the cream contour palette from Tarte and an e.l.f. concealer. You'll see me using this concealer for a lot of things throughout this tutorial. I have a really bright shade that I'm using here and a more subdued shade that's closer to my skin tone. You don't need to use two different shades if you don't want to, but I find that I get a better effect by using an extra bright shade in some steps. I'm using a densely packed synthetic brush for my contour shade, which is the bottom left one in the palette. I'm applying this color under my cheekbones, around my forehead, and under my jawline. Then I'm using a smaller brush to apply the shade to my nose and lips. You're going to get a more natural look by going along with your natural contours. I suggest not making any crazy faces when you're applying makeup so you can better see where your natural lines fall. It's also important to remember that shadows around curves aren't sharp. If you were drawing and shading a curve, you wouldn't use a harsh line. You would bring the shadow up and around the curve. Especially on your cheekbone, you want to make sure you're blending up as much as possible, or else you'll drag your face down and you'll look like you smudged mud all over your face. For the jawline, keep your face as neutral as possible. If you're stretching your neck too much to do this step, you won't get the contour you're looking for when you return to the neutral face. Furthermore, don't be scared to bring the shade down your neck. Having more faded edges will prevent what's called the line of demarcation. If you remember, like every girl in middle school who didn't know how to match her foundation to her skin, and you could see the line like on her jaw and chin between her makeup and her real skin, that's a demarcation line. And demarcation is not our friend. So blending farther down the neck will make sure that the shadow you're creating on your jawline is more believable. And for some of us, we can use all the help we can get. For the forehead, how you shade will depend largely on your face shape. My forehead isn't especially large, so I mostly focus shading on the sides. I do add a bit more contour on the right side of the top of my forehead because my hairline looks a little bit uneven thanks to my cowlick. Like I said, how you do this part will vary heavily depending on your face shape and what you're going for. Regardless, you want to make sure you're pushing the shade into your hairline. Again, demarcation is not your friend. Also, the trick to nose contour is drawing a straight line from below your eyebrows all the way down to your nostrils. My nose hooks down a bit, so I also add shadow to the underside and up and around the curve of my nose. For your lips, add shade to the dip in your lip column and down to the cupid's bow, as well as around the perimeter of your lips. You basically want to look like you have a dirty Sanchez. After you have added all your shading, it's time to add some light to your face. For every shadow, there's a highlight, which is an important lesson for both makeup and life. I apply my concealer to the center of my forehead, down the center of my nose, between the contour lines, and on the tops of my cheeks, on my chin, and along my jawline below the cheekbone contour and above the jawline contour. After all the colors have been applied, I pat them in and blend them together a bit with a damp sponge. I use a beauty blender for this. And I didn't take a picture of it because I think we're all probably familiar with what it looks like, and I'm kind of embarrassed about how dirty mine is. So you should probably clean yours regularly, especially if you're acne prone. Do as I say, not as I do. So we're finally ready for foundation. Picking a foundation shade can be pretty tricky. Once you have a base shade, you've got to know your undertones. There's lots of tricks to determine your undertones, and there's lots of tutorials and tricks out there, but honestly, my only advice is trial and error. Don't fight your undertones. There's so many beauty gurus out there who seem to think pink undertones are the devil, and they choose a really yellow foundation to go on top of their pink undertones. And I'm here to tell you, pinkness does not equal redness. If you have cool undertones and you pick a warm complexion product, it's going to look wrong and make you look super fake. Personally, I have peachy, which is a mixture of pink and yellow undertones, but I lean more warm. After determining your undertones, you have to know your skin type. Foundations generally come in 3 finishes: luminous or dewy, matte, and natural. If you have drier skin, dewy formulas will make your skin look more alive and hydrated. If you have oily skin, matte formulas will help reduce over shininess. A natural finish is somewhere in between the two. It's not completely matte, but not overly luminous. Foundations also come in a spectrum of coverage levels: sheer, medium, and full. Like the true indecisive person that I am, I prefer a medium coverage natural finish foundation. I find this is the most lifelike formula for me, and while I want to have perfect skin, I also want to look like a living human being. One of my favorite foundations is from good old Wet n Wild. This formula smells a little bit like paint thinner, but the smell dissipates, and it's hella cheap, and it works beautifully. You want a formula that kind of sinks into your skin a little bit and doesn't settle on top of your skin. You'll know what I mean when you see it, and it's pretty obvious when someone's wearing a foundation that's just sitting on top of their skin. So once you've picked a foundation, take a small amount and drop it on your face. You want to use as little product as possible. The less product on your face, the less that can crease up and bunch up throughout the day. I don't recommend doing this step with your fingers. You're not going to get a seamless finish using your fingers, and you'll likely end up with too much product on your face and a lot of lines. I usually use a damp sponge, but you can also use a brush. When I'm blending, I start from the middle of my face and blend out onto the perimeters. Make sure to blend into your hairline, onto your ears, and down your neck. Say it with me, demarcation is not your friend.
Demarcation is not your friend.
Thank you.
I wasn't sure if I was supposed to say anything or not.
Oh, you don't have to, but time to make it look like you slept at least once in your life. Again, you want to use the least amount of product possible so there's less amount that can settle into fine lines. A note, pretty much everyone has fine lines. No amount of makeup will fix this. The best you can do is reduce creasing into these lines by using a matte formula under the eye. In general, this type of formula will move around less. You will also be better off using a higher coverage formula so you can get maximum coverage with minimum product. When picking a shade, you probably want to pick something that's brighter than your skin tone to help combat dark circles, but not so bright that you look like a clown after it's blended out. Remember, it's always easier to add more product than it is to take away. Once you've got the product on your face, blend all the way up to your lash line, onto the sides of your nose, and down onto your cheek past the bottom of your orbital rim. This will help reduce the shadow there. You probably know where I'm going with that, so I won't say it again, but demarcation is not your friend. Immediately, once the product is blended into your satisfaction, take a medium packed brush, like the one I have here, and a matte pressed powder and press it into the product. This will help reduce slip and slide by setting the liquid. I'm using the middle top yellow shade in this powder palette, which I find helps neutralize dark circles even further. After the matte powder is fully pressed in, I like to add a tiny bit of luminous powder on top so that I don't look completely dead. This is the top right shade in that palette. If you do this step, use a super light hand. You don't want a shiny under eye. You just want to liven up the area a little bit so it doesn't look so powdery. If you're not confident about doing it, just skip this step. It's not totally necessary. Your eyelid primer is going to vary with your skin type just as much as the primer for the rest of your skin. It will also depend on how many creases and fine lines there are on your eyelids. The goal for eyelid primer is twofold. One, provide as smooth of a surface as possible to apply your eye makeup, and two, cancel out any discoloration on your eyelids so that eyeshadow can be as vibrant as possible. There's lots of eyeshadow primers out there that have dimethicone, etc. in them, which will be useful for people who have oily skin or those with folded or hooded eyes. I personally have incredibly dry eyelids with a slight hood. I found what works best for me is using a bright liquid concealer and translucent setting powder. I blend this into my eyelid, into the side of my nose, and down out to the side of my eye, making sure to blend into the line from my under eye concealer. I then set the product with a loose translucent powder and a damp sponge. I personally swear by Coty Airspun, but I know some people hate it because it smells like baby powder. There's lots of powders out there, so just use whatever works for you. You can also use this powder for baking, which I don't really do since my skin is super dry, but it can be really useful if you've got oily skin and want your makeup to last a really long time. There's lots of tutorials out there on this technique, so I won't really go into it since I'm not using it. I will say that if you do this, make sure your product doesn't have silica. These powders are typically labeled as HD and they look really gorgeous in person, but if there's a flash photography going on, you will look like a ghost. Google Flashback Mary, it's hilarious. Finally, try not to get the product into your eyelashes too much like I did here, because it'll make applying liner and mascara annoying later. Eyebrows are super subjective and personal, so this is just how I do mine. If you do it differently and you like how it looks, keep doing it that way. The first step is making sure your brow hairs are groomed and shaped the way you like them. That's a whole separate tutorial, and again, it's incredibly subjective based on your natural brows and your face and your eye shape and your preference. I've never personally loved the super schlacked on Instagram eyebrow trend, but I also don't love super feathery, fluffy brows. My style tends to be a little bit more in the middle. And the first thing I do with my eyebrows is use a spoolie brush to make sure all the hairs are pushed up and are in place. This type of brush is going to be essential while doing your brows since you'll also use it to blend out product. Next, I use an eyebrow pencil to define my brows. When picking a pencil, you want a really small point and a formula that isn't super waxy or super soft. Makeup is pretty much like Goldilocks. It's got to be just right. The shade you use is generally going to be the darkest shade in your hair. Once you have your pencil, you're going to want to define the underside of your brow like in this picture. You can use a really steady hand for this. Then define the top of the brow. You'll want to use about 70% strength of what you used for the bottom definition and skip over the front or innermost part of your eyebrow. You want that section to fade up a bit to the top so it can be more feathery. When it comes to the shape and thickness of your brow, my best advice is to build off your natural brow. After the outside of the brow is done, you'll fill in the rest with short, light, hair-like strokes. Go with the natural direction of your hairs. For the front of your brows, create a faded look from bottom to top for a more natural look. Once you've penciled to your satisfaction, blend it all through by wiggling your spoolie brush through the hairs. You want to break up any clumps of products as well as spread the product completely over the hairs. So I then like to fill in my brows with any bare spots using a lighter colored powder. Using a different shade helps create dimension that tricks the eye into seeing the brows as more full. I use a small angled brush for this and then pat them into the bald spots. And again, I skip the top of the front of the brow as we're going for a faded feathery look here. Using your spoolie again to blend everything through. After everything is shaded to your liking, you can choose to carve out your brow. I like to do this underneath the brow to clean up the line a little bit and to highlight the brow bone. Take a bit of concealer on a small synthetic paddle brush and draw a small line under your brows. You can also carve out the top of the brow if you like, but I think it ends up looking too harsh, but you do whatever you want. After you've got the carving laid down, blend down with a sponge or brush onto the eyelid. Avoid blending up because it'll get into the brow and look really messy. After everything is carved out and you're satisfied it is time to set your brows. You can achieve this setting by spraying hairspray onto your spoolie brush if you like, but clear brow gel is my go-to. This step is especially essential if you're like me and your brow hairs like to grow straight down. Brush your hairs up for a fuller look. And you thought you were done with contouring. For your powder contour that goes on top of your foundation and concealer, choose a really cool tone contour shade to imitate a natural shadow. I'm using the middle shade in this palette. You're going to place the product in the same places you did with your cream contour. Use a large fluffy brush for this step. I like using a fluffy fan brush because it helps me create a straighter, more symmetrical shading. Use a light hand and build the shade. If you go in too hard and too fast, it'll end up looking muddy. When it comes to smaller areas like your nose and lips, I like to use a small angled brush. Remember to blend up and around curves. Bring your forehead and cheekbone contours into your hairline and your jawline contour down your neck. And in order to have a more sun-kissed look, use a touch of bronzer. You want a shade that's warmer than your contour shade without looking super orange. Take a large fluffy brush and gently pat the bronzer over top of your cool tone contour and take it a little bit farther into the center of your face. My general rule of thumb is that if you can see the warmth line, you've done too much. Go slow and check up close and far away to make sure it's to your liking. But if you're digging the Moonlight Princess look, you can skip this step. It's not super essential. This step will add highlight as well as clean up your previous steps. I'm using a pressed powder highlight shade, the top left one in this palette, and a loose fluffy brush. Pack the highlight onto the highlight zones from before and blend out with small circles into the bronzer and contour zones. I find this step is especially helpful for cleaning up and sharpening your cheekbones. It's easy to drag your shading down too low in this area, so use this step to lighten up under your cheekbones. I like to use a pigmented pressed powder for this, but you can also use a translucent loose powder if you prefer. This step will ensure that everything looks super airbrushed. Don't skip blush, trust me. You'll look much more alive if you just use it. The first step to applying blush correctly is to forget everything your mom ever told you about it. Just wipe it from your memory. First off, do not smile when placing the product. As soon as you go back to resting bitch face, your product will be too low and your face will look saggy. You can bring the blush further front onto the apples of your cheeks if you want a more youthful, round look, or you can bring it back further onto your cheekbones for a more mature look. It's entirely your preference. For this look, I picked a shade that was pretty neutral, since the eyeshadow we're going to do is pretty out there. But do what you want and what you think looks good with your skin tone. When applying blush, you probably want a powder that isn't crazy pigmented, because it's going to be a little more forgiving. Again, it's easier to build up the color than it is to take away. So what you want to do is swirl the powder onto your blush brush, and I prefer an angled brush for this, and just pat it onto your skin. Don't sweep. If the first thing someone sees on your face is blush, you've done too much. You can pat your highlighter powder on top of this to correct it and take it down a notch, but it's easier just to avoid this mistake if possible. It's kind of confusing, but in addition to highlighting in the contour context with a matte shade, you also add glow with a highlight. I don't know who decided it would be the same word, but here we are. When choosing a shade, you want to make sure the base tone, which means the deepness or lightness of the color, mimics your skin tone. If you go too deep or too light, it'll look chalky on your skin. Basically, when the light isn't catching the shine of the product, you want to not be able to see it at all. When it comes to picking the shade of the product, you can pick something that mimics your undertones and natural glow, or you can choose something that goes with the rest of your makeup. Do whatever you want. There are no rules. For this look, I chose an icy cool shade because I thought it would tie in better to the eye look. Apply the powder on top of your cheekbones, up into your brow bone, above your eyebrows, not the center of your forehead unless you want to look like a cone head. And make sure you apply also on your cupid's bow, your chin, and the tip of your nose. You want to place this product onto the top planes of your face that would naturally catch the light. Keep in mind too that the more shine there is, the more emphasized any texture will be. So use caution if you've got textured skin. Highlight comes in all kinds of strength, from a natural glow within type of a vibe to a heavy beam into space look. It's entirely up to you how hard you want to go. Keep in mind too that where you tend to get shiny throughout the day, and maybe don't go as heavy in those areas. Everyone always asks me how I get my makeup to look so airbrushed, and one of the best tips I have is spraying down your face once you've placed all your powder products. It's important to know your skin type for this step as well, so you don't choose a product that will either be too drying or too hydrating. There's lots of high-end sprays, but if I'm being honest, I find that e.l.f. spray works just as well for me. This may not be the case for you, so you do you if you like the more expensive products. When spraying your face, you want to avoid spraying your eyes. If it gets in your eyes, it's going to hurt since most sprays have alcohol in them. The alcohol is the ingredient that sets your makeup and gets it to stay. It's pretty much impossible to avoid. I do 2 to 3 layers of spray for maximum setting and an airbrush finish. Because I'm extra, I like to dry the spray with a fan, but you can just wait for it to dry between layers if you like. You don't want to spray so much that it's dripping off your face because this will create drip lines, which you don't want. But you do want to ensure that your face is fully saturated. Additionally, the spray on the bottle is almost as important as the product itself. Pro tip, if you like the product but hate how it sprays out, just pour it into a different bottle. When you're picking eyeshadow for this look, you want to set yourself up for success as much as possible. Even the best makeup artist is going to have a hard time if they're using the wrong products. Pick eyeshadows that are highly pigmented and easily blendable. You can tell if a product doesn't fit this criteria if when swatching it gets crumbly and patchy. In general, shiny shades are going to swatch much better because they have more oils than the mattes do. For this look, you want shades that are similar to the ones that are swatched on my arm. Additionally, since we're doing a darker eye look today, I recommend putting a layer of translucent powder using a damp sponge under your eye to catch fallout. This will make it a lot easier to sweep away when the eye look is done. The first thing you want to do for this look is map out the shape of the eyeshadow with a deep purple and using a pencil brush. Be mindful of your individual eye shape. I tend to go for a more cat eye look since I have more space on the outside of my eyelids. My general tips are to keep it high to create lift and open the eye up. If you have hooded or folded eyes, make sure that you place your line above your natural crease so that it doesn't disappear when you open your eyes up fully. If you're having trouble determining where the natural crease is, you can try opening your eyes up and looking straight ahead and mapping it out like that. After you've mapped out the border, take a shader brush to pat the color onto the lid like in this picture. Make sure you're using a packing, not a sweeping motion so you can get maximum pigmentation. Don't worry too much about making it super even because we're largely going to be covering it up in the next steps. After you've laid down your base, take a warm coppery shade and blend out the edges with a small, fluffy brush. Use windshield wiper motions and small circles to diffuse harsh lines. Sweep the color out past the tail of your base shade. In order to get the holographic oil slick look, mentally divide your eyelid into quadrants. Also, I noticed when I was putting this together that I forgot to take pictures of every quadrant after I applied the shade, so I had to redo it the next day, and that's why I don't have the rest of my makeup on in some of those pictures. Mind your business. Use a small paddle brush to pack, not sweep, the colors on. Try not to place the colors all the way to the top of the purple base as we want it to just peek through a little bit. First, take a dark blue shade and place it on the outer quadrant on top of the base. Next, put a blue-green shade on the middle outer quadrant, then a yellow-green shade, and then an orange shade onto the innermost quadrant. Let the orange brush onto the bottom lash line as well. This will help open your eye up. Lay each shade on top of the border with the last color to help it blend. Go back and relayer as much as you like to achieve the vibrancy you desire. This process takes a while. There's no need to rush, so take your time to get it right. After you've got it how you like it, blend out the top again to ensure there are no harsh edges. After your quadrants are done, use a small fluffy brush to place a champagne shade to highlight your inner corner. Feel free to sweep this color into the inner quadrant if you like. Next, take a teeny tiny shading brush and a warm purple color and line under your lower line. Try not to make this line super harsh, but if you do, worry not. Just take an orange shade and diffuse it out with a fluffy brush. I personally like to line the lower lash line on the outer half of my lash line and kind of diffuse it into the inner part. I find this opens up the inside of my eye and helps lift my outer eye. Make sure you're sweeping this color into the winged out part of your upper eyeshadow for maximum cat eye. As in previous steps, just take your time. Blend until your arm falls off. This is the part of makeup that I feel like intimidates a lot of people, but I find it is so worth it to create a more sophisticated look. You want to make sure you're using a pencil that is soft enough that you don't have to use a lot of pressure, but not so soft that it will bleed everywhere. You'll definitely want a waterproof liner since your eyes are like wet. Line your upper and lower waterlines. Your eyelid skin is super thin, so the less you can pull at it to place the product, the better. But you do what you got to do. You just might be wrinkly later if you pull too much. If your eyes are super watery, you can do this step before the eyeshadow and let them rest for a few minutes before moving on. This step is essential because it thickens your lash line without covering up all the beautiful eyeshadow you just laid down. Also, if you're going to apply falsies, it will cover up any flesh-colored tones on your eyelid to make it look like your lashes are more natural. The first step to doing a successful wing liner is to understand your eye shape. There's tons of tutorials out there on how to do a wing, and I find them largely unhelpful since everyone's eye shape is super different. The only thing you can do is practice. I used to practice before I would take a shower or wash my face at night. If you're not confident, don't practice in high stakes situations like before you're going out or if you're in a rush. The best advice I have is to not be afraid. If you're scared, the liner will sense this and screw you over intentionally. You're in charge and you have to show the liner who's boss. The next step is to finding a product that works for you. The product itself is almost not even as important as the tip on your eyeliner. I personally swear by Absolute New York Nano Liner, but find what works best for you. For this look, I would recommend a small wing. Make your liner as thin as possible. This will help make the look symmetrical and ensure you don't go too big too fast. I'm going to be using magnetic lashes today, so I'm applying a magnetic liner along my lash line. Magnetic liner needs about 2 to 3 layers in order to be effective, so make sure you're drying completely between the layers. Next, you'll want to curl your lashes. Pick a curler that fits the contour of your eye shape to avoid pinching your skin. This is super important to help you blend your falsies into your natural lashes. If you have straight lashes like me underneath curly falsies, you're going to have a bad time. You want to curl before applying mascara because your lashes are more prone to breaking when they have mascara on them. Google it, there are horror stories. Make sure you're curling in sections from base to tip and gently pushing the curler back into the eyelid for maximum lift. For mascara, you don't really need a super fancy formula since we're going to be applying lashes. Just make sure it's black to match your liner and falsies. And just a general note, when you're not using black eyeliner and lashes, I think it looks better to apply a brown mascara if you've got lighter hair. Do whatever you want, but I think it looks super weird when a blonde girl like me is wearing super black mascara with natural makeup. You match your brows to your natural hair tones. I think it looks better when you do the same with your mascara, but that's just me. If you're liking the stark contrast, keep doing it. When applying the mascara, wiggle the wand through from base to tip. Make sure you're sweeping the product in the direction you want your lashes to go, which means sweeping your outer lashes out if you're going for a cat eye. Another note, you can layer a mascara to dramatize your natural lashes. Just keep in mind that adding more product can lead to more smudging. Side note to the side note, try not to use waterproof mascara every day. Taking it off is harder and rubbing your eyes too much makes your eyelashes fall out and can give you wrinkles. If you're having problems with lots of smudging under your eyes with everyday use, you're probably using too much product or the wrong products. While we're waiting for mascara and eyeliner to fully dry, I like to move on to the lips. To go with this eye look, I like a warm, rosy chestnut nude. But who am I kidding? I pretty much use this shade with every look that I do. But you can do whatever shade you want. I like to leave whatever face makeup is on my lips because my natural lip color is pretty pigmented and my natural lip line is also kind of uneven. I also have kind of sad thin lips, and I'm too poor to afford lip fillers, so I use these techniques to fake full lips as much as possible. First, you gotta overline. The trick to this is to line on top of your natural lip line, not fully outside and not fully inside. Next, use your liner to contour, adding it to the inside of your lips and down the center of your bottom lip. Also fill in the outer corners completely. Just like with the rest of contouring, we want to trick the eye into thinking there's more dimension than there actually is. Now, apply your main lip color on top of the liner. Use as little product as possible that provides adequate coverage to avoid bunching and crumbling. Now, apply a lighter nude gloss to the center where the light would naturally hit. My other trick to faking full lips is keeping my mouth as relaxed as humanly possible. Not a duck face, but not pursed lips either, just a natural pout. Now that the lips are done and eyeliner and mascara is completely dried down, it's time to apply falsies. For this look, choose a smaller lash that won't take over the eyelid so we can still see all the pretty eyeshadow. Depending on your eye shape, you may want a lash that flares out or an accent lash like the one that I've chosen. At this point, I largely prefer magnetic lashes over traditional glue lashes. The reason I like them better is that they're a lot more forgiving if you mess up on the application. If you've ever gotten lash glue in your eye, you'll know it's the worst pain of your life. There's also lots of different techniques for placing your lashes, but what works best for me is closing my eye and using both of my hands to set the lash down. You'll have to experiment to see what works for you. Some people like to keep their eyes completely open and use tweezers to place the lash. As long as you like how it looks, there's no wrong way. Another note, make sure you're trimming the lash to your lash line length. If it's too long, it's going to droop down off the side and drag your whole eye down. Also keep your eye shape in mind. If your lash is too big, you're going to have a bad time no matter how well you apply it. After the lashes are placed, I like to add another layer of highlight because I'm extra, but if you already like your glow as is, then you can just skip it. For this layer of highlight, I picked a champagne shade and applied it with a light fan brush. Now to set the face, I'm going to use 2 sprays for this step. An illuminating spray for the perimeter of my face and the same one I used before down the middle. Again, make sure you're not spraying your eyes so you don't make your eye makeup bleed everywhere. Dry and layer like you did the last time. And then you're done. The last step is taking copious selfies, as I've done here. There are a lot more pictures, but I felt subconscious posting every single one of them. Ta-da! The end.
Woo!
Yay!
Okay.
Yay!
That was
Yay!
so
Good
informative.
job.
That
Yeah.
was, that was
Did you
wonderful.
guys learn a lot?
I did.
Yeah,
Yes.
actually.
That
I
was
need
incredible.
those tips.
That was really
Thank you.
okay. I'm realizing now I've been doing it wrong. I've been doing everything
Yeah.
so wrong.
Oh, same.
It's not wrong unless you don't like how it looks.
Well,
I mean, I've definitely been doing it wrong then.
you addressed a lot of things that like qualms that I had about like putting on my makeup, things that were annoying, especially when it comes to foundation.
Yeah.
That I'm like, oh, that's why it looks like shit.
Well, I feel like most everything that I've learned about makeup, I've learned the hard way. So I'm glad that you're benefiting from my mistakes.
I have a
It was
question.
so comprehensive.
Question?
Yes. So I've heard a lot of people say when it comes to makeup, you get what you pay for. Would you say that there are like certain types of products where that's more true than others? Because
Eyeshadow.
I'm balling on a budget here, and by that I mean I'm a cheapskate, and I see all this really great makeup, and I'm like, that's amazing, and then I don't want to pay for it. So like, what would you say are the items that you would most benefit from like springing for the good shit?
I think Kristen was probably right. Eyeshadow, but a massive caveat to that, there are some brands out there that are on the cheaper side that can be really good. Like ColourPop is one of my all-time favorite brands, and they're like a little more expensive than drugstore, but they're not like Urban Decay or like Anastasia. Like they're still pretty reasonably priced. Like this eyeshadow palette that I used for a lot of the shades in this look, I think this was like $38. And you get 35 shades. So that's like a little more than $1 per shade, and they're all really good, and you can get a lot of really versatile looks out of it.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I know that NYX has some good, like their Ultimate Basic palettes are pretty good. I don't own that one, but I've heard some good things about it. The other category that I would say is like brow products. I have yet to try any good brow products from the drugstore. That's not to say they're not out there. I just don't know what they are.
That's good to know. Because I think maybe the most high-end brand that I have right now is like L'Oreal.
I mean, L'Oreal is like the high end of the drugstore.
I mean, yeah. That's when I feel like I'm really treating myself, you know?
Yes.
L'Oreal
Yeah, but
because
I mean,
I'm
like,
worth
the
it.
fact of the matter is, a lot of high-end makeup is not as good as like Maybelline. So you just gotta like, look at reviews, try out and know what you like going in. Because I mean, like, just because you spend a lot of money doesn't mean you're gonna get a good.
Gotcha.
Yeah, oddly enough, the best foundation I found, at least for my skin, is like Revlon full coverage. Oddly enough,
Huh.
Yeah, my two
I've
favorites
tried
right
some higher
now
ones
are
too,
the
like
Wet n
Tarte and
Wild
other shit.
that was in this tutorial and L'Oreal 24-hour Infallible. Those are my two favorite right now, and those are both drugstore.
Oh, I just remembered another question. So, you know, services like Ipsy and stuff like that, where you can get like,
Ipsy's rad.
is it?
I had it for like 6 months or so, and I got some really good stuff in there.
I've toyed with the idea of maybe
I love it.
subscribing. Okay, is there? I mean, I know that Ipsy's not the only one. Would you say that there is like a service like that that's better than the rest, or is Ipsy like the go-to, or what?
Ipsy, I feel like, is a good starting place if you're just getting into makeup. But the one that I liked the best when I was subscribing to a lot of the stuff was BoxyCharm. It was back then, it's been a while, but it was $20 a month, and you got 5 full-size middle to high-end products.
Nice.
So it was really good. And I mean, like with any subscription service, it's kind of a crapshoot. Like some months you're gonna get some really good stuff, and other months you're gonna get some meh or not so good stuff. And you end up with a lot of stuff that you probably don't like. But if you're just getting into makeup and you don't know what you don't like, it's kind of a good place to start.
Yeah, that's my problem. Is I feel like even though like I've been doing makeup since middle school, you know, it's never been with like quote unquote good products, and I feel like even after doing it for over half my life, there's still so much that like I don't know what I'm doing. So I just
Well, like I said in the tutorial, even the best makeup artist in the world is going to have a hard time if they're not using good products.
Yeah,
So, like,
makes sense.
and for the most part, like, this is a hobby of mine. That's the only reason I have so many products. But, like, if you're just, like, an everyday wearer, like, do you really need to be, like, a makeup artist? No. You just got to be able to do what you like.
Makes sense. Most days I fucking don't bother. Because I'm like,
I mean, same. I
who
either
gonna
wear a
see me?
full face or nothing. There's no in between.
That said, I really like now I kind of want to like invest a little bit more in makeup stuff because like the times that I do want to go all out, I feel like I don't really have good makeup to like set a look apart. I feel like I have my no makeup face and then I have my regular makeup face and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, diversifying what's in your repertoire can elevate all the looks you do. Like there's no harm in learning how to do more than one. And I mean, there's like so many tutorials out there now that you can learn how to do pretty much whatever you want.
Yeah, that's badass.
Yeah.
Thank you, Julia.
Yeah. So good, dude.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Success.
Thank you.